I think most people really tended to enjoy Amnesia the Dark Descent because, duh, it's terrific. Go watch my last video about it if you want to hear me go into greater detail about it. This video is about its sequel, Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs. This game was a lot more polarizing than the first one, but I think it was more due to people's expectations of what the game was supposed to be rather than the actual faults of the game. And it has faults, don't get me wrong. Of course, it's far from a perfect game, but I find that too often the criticism of it stems from misunderstandings of the game's purpose. So what were these expectations and where did they come from? Of course, any sequel to a game is inevitably going to be compared to its predecessor, and Machine for Pigs is no exception. Before the release of Machine for Pigs, people were expecting a game very similar to The Dark Descent, as a typical sequel would be, with mostly similar gameplay mechanics and design with a new setting and story. And you know what? It was completely fair to expect Machine for Pigs to be mostly similar to the first game. I definitely wasn't expecting it to turn out how it did. The first Amnesia game can be accurately described as an adventure game, but that's really not the case with Machine for Pigs. Machine for Pigs was very different from the first Amnesia, and that's because it had a different purpose. And I think it becomes a bit easier to understand what the purpose is when you recognize that Machine for Pigs was made by a different developer. Frictional Games did not develop Machine for Pigs, it was developed by the Chinese Room. These two developers make different types of games. Frictional makes horror adventure games, while the Chinese Room makes... well, they make games that are a bit tougher to describe. Let's take a look at their first game, Dear Esther. So the game Dear Esther involves you walking around an abandoned island, discovering different locations around it, and listening to monologues from the protagonist that gradually reveal the story the game was trying to communicate. Dear Esther had excellent visuals, and the story was probably good. I don't think I really got it. I mean, there was a drunk driving accident, I guess. Esther died, probably. The island is not really real, maybe. Like, the island itself is just a metaphor, and then at the end you're actually a bird. Oh, god damn it. You know, I'm sure there's actually a coherent story, and the writers at the Chinese Room aren't just bullshitting here, but I think there's no shame in admitting that I didn't completely grasp what the story was going for. And it was kind of the same with the story in Machine for Pigs, although not to nearly that degree, thankfully. Because whereas 90% of the story in Dear Esther was really abstract, 90% of the story in Machine for Pigs was presented clearly. So that ended up working in my favor, at least, by allowing me to better understand what was going on, probably because I'm such an uncultured swine that can't appreciate abstract art. Machine for Pigs had a really great story, and I'm pretty confident that I even kind of understood some of the more abstract elements of it, and even that only represented a small portion of the story. It's about the dangers of industrialism and capitalism, probably. I'm looking forward to Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, which is the game the Chinese Room is currently working on and set for release in 2015. So what the developers set out to make in Machine for Pigs was a story-driven exploration and discovery game, not an adventure game. Once you appreciate the intent of the developers, it becomes easier to see how it's a bit unfair to criticize it for lacking in the elements that made Amnesia an adventure game. So here are some of the things that changed between The Dark Descent and Machine for Pigs. The lantern was replaced with an electric light that never ran out, the sanity system was removed, the game was more linear, and it was generally just a lot easier. Now consider these changes in relation to how Machine for Pigs is a story-based exploration and discovery game, not too different from Dear Esther, and they kind of make sense. I think another good illustration of Machine for Pigs' intent is how there aren't any difficulty levels in the game. It's not supposed to be difficult. You can easily get through the whole game without actually getting hit by a monster once. The game just isn't supposed to be challenging because its primary purposes are to convey a story and evoke an emotional response from the player. And of course in this game, the main emotion it seeks to evoke is fear, and holy shit did I ever find this game scary.
That door's open and there's new blood. Okay. Oh no. Oh! I didn't know there was a monster this early in the game. There's still only 15 people. Oh! Dude. I can't handle this, man. I can't do it, Captain. I just can't do it, Captain. Ah! Quit flashing, you lantern asshole. I can't even say things that make sense. Ah! Dude, I get the feeling that he's chasing me right now. Where is he? Ah! 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 Nope, can't go up there either. Ah! Ah! That sounded like Pee Wee Herman. Shit, is he coming right at me? Oh my god, he's coming right at me. Oh god! What am I doing? I'm an idiot. I am an idiot. He's chasing after me. And it's just... Ah! Here's it! Ah! Oh my god! What is happening? Ah! What's happening? Let's not go that way. My entire body is sweating and I just realized this.
But to be fair, I'm kind of a total pussy when it comes to playing horror games alone. I still haven't got past an hour into Lone Survivor because that game is unsettling as shit. I think it's kind of interesting if you're familiar with a lot of the other videos on our channel because we first started playing games together partially because I was too scared to play Amnesia myself. Some of the moments we experienced playing that game together in my basement with the laptop hooked up to the TV during the summer were super memorable, and it was just really neat discovering a new way for a bunch of people to enjoy playing a single-player game. I distinctly remember the first time I tried playing Amnesia by myself. I had already played through part of it with some of the other guys, and during an earlier part in the game, I caught a glimpse of a monster that we hadn't seen before, and it was so so unexpected that I had to stop playing and call Alex. I don't think I've actually ever played The Dark Descent alone ever since then, to be perfectly honest, but I did play the entirety of Machine for Pigs by myself, and I'm kind of weirdly proud of it. I would say Machine for Pigs is scarier than The Dark Descent, but that may also be because I've played through the original Amnesia so many times that it doesn't really scare me at all anymore. But I also think it's because of how the game was improved over the original in its technical aspects. The sound design was phenomenally well done, and the music was also really great. The sound design did an excellent job of contributing to the game's scariness in the convincing way, presented various faraway noises that really contributed to making the game very atmospheric. The environments had a great sense of artistic design and scale as well, whether it's with any of the outdoor areas the game had, or a complicated array of intricately suspended pipes, or enormous rooms with fantastical machines. But the fact that you couldn't interact with so much of the environment actually did disrupt the immersion, and that might be the main flaw with Machine for Pigs. This is the kind of thing that wasn't excusable given the type of game that it is. Not being able to open many doors or cupboards contributed to the feeling that you were supposed to be following an obvious linear path rather than finding your own way through a real environment. And the environmental interaction and immersion can be looked at as staples with earlier games developed by Frictional. Another one of the flaws with the game, although this may be just personal taste, was the game's pacing. The original Amnesia had an excellent sense of pacing in the way it alternated between the calm of the game's safe areas and the tension of the other sub-levels. The level design of each game might be the root of this difference. The path you take through Machine for Pigs is completely linear as you move from level to level, whereas the level design of The Dark Descent had the game mostly divided into hubs that served as safe areas, and these had sub-levels where you would go to collect objects needed to get to the next section and sometimes have direct encounters with the monsters. Since Machine for Pigs had this type of linear progression, which in itself isn't a bad thing, especially given the type of games the Chinese room makes, it didn't have these safe areas, or at least they weren't made clear to the player, and this induced a constant sense of dread and tension throughout the entire game. Of course, this is a horror game, so you might not think that that's a bad thing, but I just prefer having a type of pacing that allows you to relax occasionally before being put into another scary situation. Like I said, this really is just a matter of personal preference, because I'm kind of a total pussy. Now, one of the improvements that I really appreciated about Machine for Pigs compared to the first Amnesia was the sense of scale, not just in the environments, but how the game conveyed that there was a lot at stake within the game's story. In the first Amnesia, you have an antagonist that wants to fuck up the world by opening up some interdimensional portal, but the game didn't really do enough to illustrate to the player that there was a lot at stake to give a sense of motivation to having the player succeed. In Machine for Pigs, the antagonist wants to unleash an army of pigmen on the world and turn everybody into pigmen or sacrifice them to their machine. In one of the final scenes of the game, and certainly the best one, the protagonist is running through the streets of London as the pigmen are killing everybody. This scene really induces a sense of holy shit, because you're witnessing firsthand the chaotic consequences of not having the protagonist succeed. But yes, there are some flaws in the way this scene was presented. The amount of action the player gets to witness is still quite limited and actually makes the city seem pretty empty. If the developers had put more effort into adding more to the scene and making the city seem more populated, it could have become truly shocking instead of just being a cool scene. And it is a great sequence in the game, but it's unfortunate how thinking about it always causes me to lament over how much better it could have been. So Machine for Pigs definitely excelled where it needed to. As a story-based exploration and discovery game, it has a compelling story, an excellent sense of artistic design, and awesome sound. It's just an exceptionally scary horror game. It isn't an adventure game, but it doesn't need to be. Of course, this game isn't for everybody, and it's totally okay to not like the game because it's not challenging or because it's really more of an experience than it is a game. But even if you don't like this style of game, I think it's important to appreciate its purpose and respect it for doing what it set out to do. You might be upset that Frictional didn't work on Machine for Pigs, but you should be happy they did spend that time developing Soma, which I'm pretty certain is going to be an amazing game when it comes out in 2015. Woo!
Oh, Jesus, that was too unnerving. My God. My God.